I never thought my life would turn out this way. As a teenager, business and entrepreneurship weren't even on my radar. I was fascinated by machines, how they worked, why they broke, and how to fix them. My father, a mechanical engineer, nurtured that curiosity, always handing me broken clocks and old motors to tinker with. I loved the process, taking something apart just to put it back together again. For the longest time, I planned to follow in his footsteps. But then I met printing by accident. My first job was at a small, family-run print shop near my childhood home. I started as a delivery boy, running freshly printed flyers to local businesses. But it wasn't the errands that intrigued me, it was the machines. Their rhythmic hum, the precision of ink on paper. I was hooked. I begged the owner, Mr. Radcliffe, to teach me, and before long, I was threading rolls of paper, aligning plates, mixing ink. It felt natural, like a language I already knew. At 21, I took a leap. I used my savings to buy a second-hand Heidelberg press, old and temperamental but still functional. I rented a tiny workshop and took whatever print jobs I could find. Business was slow, and the stress was relentless, long nights, financial strain, setbacks at every turn. But I kept pushing. A few years later, I had steady clients. By 30, my print shop wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Then came Rebecca. She was unlike anyone I had ever met, sharp, ambitious, breathtaking. I was captivated from the start, and our romance was fast and intense. Our wedding was simple but full of laughter and promises. We built a life together, and soon, our daughters arrived. Sophie, our eldest, had my hunger for knowledge. Lily, our youngest, had Rebecca's charm and effortless social grace. For years, I believed I had everything, a growing business, a family, a wife I adored. But something shifted. I couldn't pinpoint when it started, but it was gradual. Conversations lost their depth. Her body language changed. I told myself we were just tired, caught in the cycle of work and routine. But the distance between us grew, no matter how hard I tried to bridge it. I made an effort, planned date nights, cut back on work, tried to be home more. It never seemed to matter. She was slipping away. That Friday, work had been brutal. One of the factory machines broke down, costing us $10,000 in lost revenue. I spent the entire day with the engineering crew, troubleshooting, problem-solving, trying to salvage what I could. By the time we got it running again, I was completely drained. That night, I parked in the garage and just sat there for a moment, exhausted. For over a decade, I had run my own print business in the northern suburbs of Sydney. It was a constant grind, but I loved it. Home, on the other hand, had become a different kind of challenge. Lately, Rebecca had been distant, emotionally checked out. I thrived on affection, but she had been withdrawing, brick by brick, until I felt like I barely recognized her. I tried to meet her halfway, but balancing her needs with my work was impossible. I'm Alexander Vaughn. I'm 42 years old. Rebecca and I have two daughters, Sophie, 18, in her third year of engineering school, eager to help revolutionize the printing business. Then there's Lily, 15, bright but more interested in socializing than studying. That weekend, the house was eerily quiet. Both girls were out, Lily with friends, Sophie with her boyfriend. I thought maybe, just maybe, this was a chance for Rebecca and me to reconnect. After parking my truck, I stepped inside. The house was empty. I poured myself a Kraken and Coke, put on some music, and let my mind drift back to the factory. The financial hit was frustrating, but nothing compared to the sinking feeling in my chest every time I thought about Rebecca. The sound of heels snapped me out of it. Rebecca walked in, looking stunning, dressed to go out. My stomach clenched. Something was off. "You look amazing," I said, forcing a smile despite my exhaustion. She returned the gesture, but it felt hollow. "Sorry, Lou. It's been a rough day. I don't have the energy to go out tonight." Her expression didn't change. "That's fine, Alex. I wasn't expecting you to come." That threw me. We never went out separately, and when she did see friends, she never dressed like this. "You weren't." I frowned. "Then why are you dressed like? We're going on a date." She hesitated, then met my eyes. "Alexander," she started, then stopped. Something inside me turned cold. "Are you leaving me?" Her eyes widened slightly. "No, of course not." I let out a bitter laugh. When she reached for me, I pulled back. "Let me guess," I said dryly. "You deserve this, right? After raising two kids, after supporting our family, after tolerating me?" She glanced down, shifting uncomfortably. "Alex, I've been seeing Marcus. It's been a few months." The room tilted. Marcus. My voice was eerily calm. Marcus Holloway? The married guy from your office? The one with 3 kids? That Marcus. She nodded, a flicker of panic crossing her face. Yes. He's been there for me while you haven't. I exhaled sharply. Oh, don't give me that. You've been pushing me away for months. At least now I know why. She tried to explain, to justify it. But the more she talked, the angrier I became. Stop trying to dress this up as something else, Rebecca. Let's call it what it is. You cheated. She had the audacity to look hurt. I told you, so it's not cheating. I scoffed. Oh, is that what Marcus told you? That honesty makes it okay? He's lying to you just like he's lying to his wife. And yes, it is cheating. I don't agree to it. She hesitated. Have you been with him? I asked. She swallowed. He kissed me. I exhaled a sharp laugh, drained of everything. Well, that's that then. We're done. I grabbed my drink and walked outside to the terrace, trying to process the wreckage of my life. After the longest, most exhausting day, all I had wanted was to come home to my wife. Instead, I came home to this. She had already left us in her mind. 5 minutes later, she appeared in the doorway, her voice softer. Alex, I love you, but I need this. I've felt trapped for the past year. Marcus understands. This won't be forever. You'll see. I kept my eyes on the yard, refusing to look at her. No, Rebecca. You should have come to me. I was supposed to be your partner, your best friend. Instead, you turned to someone else and stole my chance to be there for you. Now, I don't know if I can ever be near you again. She stood still, then spoke with chilling confidence. Alexander, you can't leave. Marcus says if you do, I can take everything, half the business, the house, the kids. I could turn them against you. My blood ran cold. You do that to me? My voice was ice. You cheat, threaten me, and expect me to just accept it? She hesitated. I didn't want this, she admitted. But Marcus says in court, I'd win. You don't have much of a choice. I stood abruptly, locking eyes with the woman I had once loved. You're a selfish, unfaithful liar, I said, betrayal laced in every word. She flinched but held her ground. I told you, so it's not cheating. I laughed bitterly. Marcus is feeding you that line, huh? Just like he's lying to his wife. And yes, it is cheating. I don't agree to it. She faltered, then said, I'll go to counseling, after Marcus and I are done. It may take a while, but when we're tired of each other, I'll go. I stiffened. What about the girls? What about them? She said indifferently. I swallowed my disbelief. How do we explain this to them? She sighed. We don't. We're not breaking up. I stared at her, trying to comprehend her twisted logic. You're not making any sense. And what about me? While you're with Marcus, where does that leave me? She blinked, as if the thought had never crossed her mind. I don't know, she murmured. Marcus says I should be his for now. I snapped. Her expression hardened. Alexander, that's not fair. I cut her off, my voice rising. Fair? You're abandoning your husband for some guy who's cheating on his wife. She flinched. The anger boiled over. I drained my glass and hurled it at the wall. The shattering echoed, a perfect reflection of how I felt inside. A car horn blared outside. Rebecca hesitated for a second, then turned and left. I sat there, numb. My phone rang. Dad? Sophie's voice came through. I forgot my weekend bag. Jacob and I are coming to grab it. Mom's phone went straight to voicemail, so I called you. I exhaled, forcing composure. It's fine, sweetheart. Your mom isn't home, but I'll leave your bag by the door. Silence. Daddy? Her voice was cautious. I cursed myself. My tone had given something away. Sophie, I'm just having a rough day. Work was hell, and your mom and I had a fight. Don't worry about it. Dad, don't lie to me, she said firmly. I'll be there soon. When she arrived, she saw it in my face, the pain, the emptiness. She gripped my hands. That damn woman, she muttered. Then, out of nowhere, she asked, Dad, doesn't Mom remember the prenup? The realization hit me like a freight train. When Rebecca and I married, I was still launching my business. My parents had invested 6 figures, and their lawyers insisted on a prenup. If either spouse cheated, they'd leave with nothing but their clothes and 15% of the marital assets. The house, the cars, and custody would go to the faithful spouse. The business was never part of it. I shook my head. I don't think your mom thought this through, sweetheart. She claimed it wasn't cheating because she told me. Sophie scoffed. That doesn't change anything. She's been emotionally unfaithful for months. Lily and I felt it. We just didn't know what. A weight settled in my chest. I need to check on Lily. Sophie squeezed my hands. Dad, don't pretend this is okay. Mom broke something in you today, and I don't know if I'll ever forgive her. She's still your mom, I murmured, but even I didn't sound convinced. Mom or not, what she did was wrong, Sophie said, her voice firm. She softened after a moment. I'll talk to Lily. She already knows something's up. Despite everything, I managed to eat. Sitting with Sophie, Jacob, Olivia, and Samuel made things feel slightly less broken. Later, Olivia pulled me aside. You have an incredible daughter, Alex. I nodded. She nudged my leg. How are you? And don't lie. I sighed, my chest tightening. I still love her, but I hate what she did. I want to scream, break something, hurt them both, but I love her. My voice cracked. Olivia's expression was unreadable. What's next? Divorce. Divorce, I said firmly. And the prenup holds. She threatened to take everything, to turn the girls against me. Olivia exhaled. Alex, you're right. But I can't be your therapist. I'm too close to both of you. Tomorrow, we'll find you someone. Just know Samuel and I are here. I nodded. She's probably inside keeping Sophie from tearing her mom apart. Despite myself, I chuckled. You're probably right. We talked for an hour, anger, betrayal, numbness creeping in. When I went inside, Sophie wrapped her arms around me. Are you okay, Daddy? I glanced at Olivia, who smiled reassuringly. No, I admitted. But having you all here helps. We're staying, Sophie insisted. Jacob nodded. You shouldn't be alone. That night, I showered, tried to read, but my mind raced. Then an idea hit me. I pinged Rebecca's phone. She was 2 hours away in the Blue Mountains. Screenshot. Proof. Then I checked our security system. The footage showed everything. The front camera told me everything I needed to know. Our fight. Her confession. Her leaving. And then Marcus, stepping out of his BMW, kissing her without hesitation. She melted into him, as if nothing we had ever shared mattered. I downloaded the footage and forwarded it to my lawyer. I wanted divorce papers on her desk first thing Monday morning. Then my phone rang. Rebecca. I let it go to voicemail. A message popped up seconds later. Her voice was steady, controlled. Alexander, don't do anything stupid. When we're done, we'll talk. You'll do things my way. Then Marcus's smug voice followed. Step out of line, and I'll ruin you. Rebecca will take everything, your business, your kids. Rebecca added, her tone as casual as if she were discussing dinner. And if you tell anyone, Marcus will make sure you lose it all. Marcus chuckled. When Rebecca is done with me, she'll come back. Just play along. They laughed. The voicemail ended. I stared at my phone stunned. Any hesitation I had about divorcing her vanished. I rewrote my email to my lawyer, making sure Rebecca was served at work, publicly. Then another thought struck me. I didn't have Marcus's wife's contact information, but I would find it. She deserved to know. I wish I could say taking action helped me sleep. It didn't. By dawn, I gave up. Sophie found me in the kitchen and hugged me. Did you sleep? She asked. I shook my head. Me neither, she admitted. How could Mom do this? We talked, avoiding the inevitable until Jacob returned with coffee. As we sipped, he studied me. You didn't sleep, did you? I sighed. No. I was dealing with the lawyer when I got a voicemail from Rebecca. I played it. Sophie clenched her fists. That woman is not my mother. She wasn't wrong. By 10 a.m., we noticed something was off. Olivia and Samuel should have been here by now, Sophie noted, frowning. Jacob tried calling, first his mom, then his dad. No answer. I called 2 cell phones, house, even the cafe where we usually met. Josie, the cafe owner, confirmed they had picked up food at 8:30 a.m., heading to my place. A bad feeling crept in. Then Jacob's phone rang. He answered, and within seconds, his face turned ashen. He collapsed. Sophie rushed to his side, panicked. I took the phone from his trembling hands. This is Alexander Vaughn. Who am I speaking to? A steady but grim voice responded. Mr. Vaughn, this is Constable Matthew Collins. I need to inform Jacob of a serious accident involving his parents. My chest tightened. Are Olivia and Samuel okay? A long pause. Mr. Vaughn, is Jacob able to speak? I turned to Jacob, motionless, barely breathing, his eyes wide with shock. No, I said, my voice raw. Collins's tone remained firm. I need his consent to speak with you. I knelt beside Jacob, gripping his shoulder. Jacob, say yes. Just say yes. His lips barely moved. Yes. Collins exhaled. At 8:45 this morning, Mr. and Mrs. Carter vehicle was struck by an out-of-control semi. Their car was destroyed. Sophie gasped. My stomach dropped. Collins continued, his voice steady but heavy. Mrs. Carter is in surgery. Unfortunately, Mr. Carter did not survive. The world blurred. Samuel was gone. Olivia was fighting for her life. I forced myself to swallow. Which hospital? Royal North Shore. We're coming, I whispered. We arrived within 30 minutes, bombarding the nurses with questions. Was Olivia stable? Where was Samuel's body? Would she survive? What about the truck driver? Constable Collins filled us in. A semi had lost control, slamming into them. The driver's side took the full impact. Samuel died instantly. Olivia barely survived, a skull fracture, 2 shattered legs, deep wounds. Worst of all, she lost her left arm. Surgeons had barely stopped the bleeding. The rest of the day blurred. Despite his grief, Jacob handled the calls, his grandparents, Samuel's brother in Brisbane, Olivia's family. By the time they arrived, Sophie and I were helping with Samuel's death certificate. Then Lily showed up. She hugged Jacob and Sophie, then turned to me. Where's Mom? Sophie and I exchanged a glance. She's not coming, Sophie said coldly. Lily turned to me. Is this Marcus's fault? I stiffened. What do you know? Her voice shook. A few weeks ago, Mom bought lingerie. I asked if it was for you. She got weird, then admitted it was for Marcus. Said you'd never see it? Sophie's fists clenched. Why didn't you tell us? I didn't know how, Lily whispered. Things were already bad. I avoided her. By the time I figured it out, I couldn't face you both. Tears filled her eyes. I'm sorry, Dad. I hugged her. It's not your fault, baby. She sobbed. If I'd spoken up, maybe Aunt Olivia and Uncle Samuel would still be. Her voice broke. That night, we barely left the hospital. At 4 a.m., Olivia was out of surgery, bruised, broken, but alive. Doctors needed to monitor for brain damage. Despite his grief, Jacob thanked the surgeons. I had never been prouder of him. If he married Sophie one day, I'd be honored to call him my son-in-law. By afternoon, we planned Samuel's funeral. Jacob called their lawyer, preparing for when Olivia woke up. Atwina, Olivia's mother, arrived, hugging Jacob, then me. She had always treated me like a son. She barely mentioned Rebecca. But after Sophie filled her in, I noticed her expression darken when no one was looking. That evening, my phone rang nonstop. Distracted, I answered without checking the caller ID. This is Alexander Vaughn. A sharp voice snapped back. That's no way to answer your wife. I froze. I told you not to cause trouble, she continued, her tone dripping with arrogance. Marcus is furious. If you don't shut up, he'll ruin you. Get home. Now. Rebecca. Whatever regret she'd feigned on Friday had completely vanished. Now, she was demanding, cold, and utterly delusional. I steadied my voice, eyes creeping into my tone. Rebecca. The room went silent. Where are you? Where are the girls? Her voice dropped to a venomous hiss. If you told them anything, I swear I'll turn them against you. I ended the call mid-sentence. Let her threaten me. By tomorrow, she'd see how fast her lies unraveled. The hooker is home, I muttered. Lily exhaled. Why did you even answer? She had spent hours apologizing for not telling me sooner about Rebecca and Marcus, but after hearing everything, she was just as furious as Sophie. Earlier, she had looked me in the eye and said, Dad, in the divorce, I'm living with you. Of course, baby, I promised. Now, as she gave me a knowing look, I realized I had answered out of habit. My phone rang again. Rebecca. For 10 minutes, she called me, then started calling the girls. Finally, Sophie snapped. What? Even from across the room, I heard Rebecca's scolding tone. Sophie scoffed. Mom, stop. I have zero interest in talking to a lying, cheating witch right now. I didn't react. Neither did Lily. I'm with my family, my dad and sister. We're grieving. Stay out of it. Rebecca assumed she was talking about the divorce. She had no idea Samuel was dead. Sophie cut her off. Mom, I'm done. And yes, Dad told us everything. I'm not living with you. Silence. Then a response. Sophie's expression hardened. You're a hooker, Mom. Dad loved you. We adored you. And you threw it all away for a man who will drop you the second it's inconvenient. Another pause. Yes, Lily knows. She saw it. Dad might forgive you, but Lily hates you as much as I do. We're shouting. Sophie smirked. Pack your bags, Mom. None of us want you there when we get home. Rebecca raged. Sophie laughed. No, I won't tell you where we are. Why don't you call Marcus? Oh wait, you can't. He's with his wife. The one who has no idea he's a cheating lowlife. Rebecca sputtered. Oops, our flight's boarding. Talk to you never, Mom. She hung up. Wrong number. Despite the grief, the room erupted in laughter. Even the nurses chuckled. That night, Teresa left, promising to return in the morning. Lily and I planned to leave for a few hours while Sophie and Jacob stayed. As we were gathering our things, a nurse approached. She's awake. We exhaled in relief. How is she? I asked. She's out of it, but you can see her soon. For the next hour, we took turns visiting Olivia, bandaged, bruised, connected to machines. But the hardest part was the bandaged stump where her arm had been. I sat by her bed, forcing a smile. Hi, Petal, I whispered. My Olivia. You scared us, but I'm glad you're here. She couldn't speak, the breathing tube silencing her, but her hazy eyes met mine, silently asking. I shook my head. A tear slipped down her cheek. I stayed, talking softly, telling her how proud I was, how much we loved her, how we'd get through this together. When I stepped out, a nurse handed me a tissue. I hadn't realized I was crying. We left for a few hours, exhausted. We managed 3 hours of sleep before heading back. As we pulled into the driveway, we fell silent. A BMW X5 was parked out front. Crap. I drove past, made a U-turn, and parked down the street. The curtains shifted. Someone was watching us. Do we go in or leave? Lily asked. I sighed. We go in. But you head straight to your room, lock the door, and stay out of it. Are you sure, Dad? I can stay. I smiled. Lily hated confrontation, but she was ready now. We hit record on our phones. Then we stepped inside. Marcus stormed toward us, arrogance oozing from his every step. There he is, the little horned hub, he sneered. Ready to apologize before I ruin your life? Lily stepped forward. Marcus flinched. Rebecca hesitated, likely realizing he had just threatened a minor. A lawsuit waiting to happen. If you don't mind, Dad, Lily said flatly. I'm too tired for this. Wake me at 11:30 so we can get back to the hospital. She brushed past them, muttering a-hole and hooker under her breath before disappearing into her room. The second her door shut, they pounced. You fool. Marcus spat. Rebecca told you not to tell your daughters. He lunged. I held up my phone. I'm recording. It's been rolling since we walked in. Rebecca paled. Marcus sneered. Whatever, doormat. He was taller and heavier, but mostly fat, balding, sagging jowls. I still couldn't fathom why Rebecca had chosen him. I folded my arms, my voice calm but firm. Rebecca, I told you not to come here. And you bring him. Alexander, she started, but Marcus cut her off, stepping in close. Inches from me. We warned you, he sneered. Now I'll make your life hell. I met his gaze without flinching. You're not welcome here. His smirk widened. And what are you going to do about it? I tilted my phone slightly, letting him see the red recording light. Watch your language, I said, voice steady. My daughter's in the next room. Marcus's smirk faltered. He wasn't laughing anymore. So what? She won't say a word, and neither will you, Marcus sneered, his tone dripping with arrogance. Before I could react, he snatched my phone, raised it over his head, and smashed it onto the floor, grinding it under his heel. The screen splintered into shards, a cruel smile creeping onto his face. You're just a pathetic little printer, he mocked. Ain't nobody. You really think you matter? My fists clenched. Rebecca stepped beside him, her voice as cold as steel. Marcus is 10 times the man you'll ever be. Now that you've filled the girls' heads with lies, things are going to get very difficult for you, Alexander. Her gaze was sharp, full of scorn. Stay quiet, or we will tear you apart. I turned to her, barely able to comprehend what I was hearing. Rebecca, do you even realize what you're saying? Before she could respond, Marcus took a cheap swing. I shifted, but his fist still caught my ribs, knocking the air out of my lungs. I stumbled back, hand gripping my side. You're hitting me now? Marcus smirked. Yeah, and what are you going to do about it? Rebecca will back me up. Hell, I could end you, and she'd tell the cops it was self-defense. His chuckle was low and dark. You don't get it, doormat? I'm a lawyer. I know how to twist things. I make the rules, I control the system, I can take whatever I want, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. His chest puffed with self-importance, so convinced of his power. I turned to Rebecca, searching for any trace of the woman I had once loved. You're really going to stand by this? She hesitated. Then her lips pressed into a thin line. I'm sorry, Alexander, But yes, you're just not like him. Her words cut deeper than Marcus's punch. I exhaled slowly, feeling the last shred of patience leave me. Then I have nothing left to say. But you're both leaving. Now, Marcus scoffed. You don't get to tell me what to do. He lunged. Big mistake. His fist swung wide. I sidestepped easily. His own momentum sent him barreling forward, off balance. I hooked my foot around his ankle, yanked. And Marcus crashed straight through the coffee table. Glass exploded. Wood cracked. For a moment, he just lay there, stunned, mouth gaping like a fish out of water. Before he could recover, I grabbed his collar, pulling him in close. My voice was low and venomous. You waltzed into my house thinking you could push me around. But now, look at you. His eyes darted, wild and panicked. You think you're powerful? I tightened my grip. You're nothing. I let him drop with a pathetic thud. Rebecca gasped, scrambling to his side. What did you do? I looked at her and felt nothing. No love. No sadness. Just cold, empty indifference. You didn't even ask where we were, I said, my voice flat. Didn't check on Lily. Didn't wonder why the house was empty. I took a slow breath. You just barged in here, screaming, making threats, while one of our closest friends is dead and another is clinging to life in a hospital. Rebecca's face blanched. Oh, Alexander, you didn't. I cut her off. No, I didn't tell you. Because Sophie and Jacob already knew. They came to support me. Unlike you. I glanced at Marcus, still groaning on the floor. Olivia and Samuel came over Saturday morning to check on me. And then, I let the silence stretch. They were hit by a semi. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Samuel's dead. Olivia is in the ICU. Rebecca's face contorted, not in grief, but in anger. This is your fault, Alexander, she snapped. If you'd just shut your mouth, they wouldn't have been driving that morning. This is on you. A voice cut through the tension. No, Mom. It's on you. Rebecca and I both turned. Lily stood in the doorway. Her face was pale, but her stance didn't waver. She ignored Marcus completely, locking eyes with me. I called the police and an ambulance. They'll be here soon. Then she turned to Rebecca. You're not my mother, she said, her voice steady and sharp. And you are the reason Uncle Samuel is dead. Not Dad. Her voice quivered, but she stood firm. And it's my fault too. I should have said something sooner. Maybe if I had. Lily, stop, I said softly. She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. No, Daddy. I should have spoken up. But she pointed a trembling finger at Rebecca, is the one who caused this. She turned and slammed her door. Sirens wailed outside. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows. The second the officer stepped inside, Rebecca launched into hysterics. He attacked Marcus. I had to stop him. The officer frowned. Is he your husband? Rebecca hesitated. No, but nothing, he said, unimpressed. Still, Marcus was injured. The officers looked uncertain. Then Lily returned. Officer, she said firmly. I have proof. She held up a USB drive. It has everything. Marcus threatened my dad. My mom said she'd lie to protect him. It's all here. Rebecca's face drained of color. Marcus muttered. What? Smashing your phone wasn't enough. Lily stared him down. Dad knew something might happen. So I left my phone recording outside my door. She turned to the officer, her voice strong but shaky. I don't feel safe with my mom. She chose to protect this man. She doesn't care about me. About my sister. About Dad. Her voice wavered, but she took a breath and stood tall. Please don't make me live with her. Then she stepped beside me, her arms wrapping around my waist. That sealed it. A minor. With evidence. Rebecca's lies crumbled. Minutes later, officers placed her in handcuffs and led her toward the door. She didn't resist. Didn't argue. Just stared at me. Her eyes lingered. But she didn't say a word. Marcus was hauled off in an ambulance, groaning like a wounded animal. Rebecca, still seething, was taken to the station. Too restless to sleep. I took a long shower, changed, and made coffee. The night's events looped in my head, but there was no time to process. Lily and I drove straight to the hospital. Inside Olivia's room, Sophie and Jacob sat quietly, exhausted. Sophie's eyes landed on me, then widened. Daddy, what happened? Her gaze locked onto the bruise darkening my jawline. I sighed and told them everything. Marcus's tantrum, Rebecca's threats, the fight, the arrests. When I got to the part where I punched Marcus in the balls, Sophie let out a loud snort. Jacob? He laughed so hard he had to wipe his eyes. Then we heard a faint sound. We all turned. Olivia was awake. Her weary eyes met mine. "Olivia," I whispered, stepping closer. "Petal. I'm so sorry." She weakly reached for my hand. I took it, holding on as her fingers curled around mine. "You okay? Need anything?" Blink once for yes, twice for no. She blinked twice. Then, after a pause, she blinked 3 more times. Her grip tightened slightly, fragile, but reassuring. I didn't move. I didn't let go. I stayed right there, holding her hand, for the rest of the night. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Rebecca's parents bailed her out the next morning, blaming me for everything, until Sophie shut them down. "If you're here to make excuses for her, don't bother," she said coldly. "We're done with her." End of discussion. Days later, Rebecca returned to work, only to be served divorce papers. As if that wasn't enough, a bailiff delivered legal documents implicating Marcus. By day's end, she was suspended without pay. With nowhere to go, she moved into her parents' spare room. She came by once to pack her things. Sophie and Jacob stayed to supervise, making sure she didn't try anything. Before she left, she hugged her parents. But when she turned to Sophie, my daughter simply stared at her. "You don't belong here anymore," Sophie said flatly. "Don't come back." Lily didn't even come downstairs. That was it. Rebecca was out of our lives. A week later, Olivia's breathing tube was removed. Her first words? "Alexander, are you okay?" I froze. "Olivia, how can you even ask that?" She gave me a weak smile. "I'm fine." I shook my head. "Olivia, She cut me off. "I knew about Samuel before you told me." Her voice was soft but steady. "We had a few minutes before they pulled us from the wreck," she whispered. "He told me he loved me. He knew he wasn't going to make it. And I knew I would." Tears slipped down her face. "I remember looking into your eyes, and you confirmed it." I squeezed her hand, my chest tight. She shifted slightly. "I had a dream last night. Samuel came to me," she murmured. "He looked whole, healthy, no pain. He told me he was okay, that it was his time and the accident wasn't anyone's fault." I stiffened. She noticed. "I know," she sighed. "That's just like Samuel. No blame. Just acceptance." She looked at me. "He told me to take care of you." I swallowed hard. "Olivia, you need taking care of. You lost an arm." She chuckled, lifting her bandaged stump. "Guess I'm completely armless now, huh?" I snorted. "Looks like I'm on duty whenever you need help." She groaned but laughed through it. "I miss Samuel," she admitted. "More than words can say. But that dream? It gave me peace. And he made me promise to be there for you." I sighed, raising my hands. Fine. You can take care of me." She grinned. "But only after I get out of here. Until then, I'm in charge." Unlike the chaos of those first few weeks, the months that followed were slow and exhausting. If I wasn't at work, I was at the hospital. If I wasn't there, I was packing. The girls and I decided to sell the house. It held too many ghosts. I found a smaller place in North Sydney, 3 bedrooms, an office, and if you stood on tiptoe in the master bedroom, you could just barely see the harbor. Meanwhile, my divorce from Rebecca was in full swing. Lily refused to talk to her. Sophie barely acknowledged her. Every attempt at communication ended in disaster. Sophie moved in with Jacob. I didn't object. She was an adult now. After everything, I just wanted her to feel safe. As for Rebecca, she was falling apart. Stuck in her parents' spare room, suspended from work, cut off from her daughters, she had lost everything. Even after calling me a spineless doormat and a pathetic husband more times than I could count, she was spiraling. Her parents suggested reconciliation. I sent them the recording. They never brought it up again. Marcus? He got what he deserved. That punch to the balls? Doctors had to remove one of them. He tried to sue me. The police shut it down. His law firm? They fired him to avoid a scandal. My lawyer? He went for the jugular. Marcus settled quietly. Then, as if karma wasn't done with him, his wife got a copy of the recording. I swear I didn't send it. But Lily smirked every time his name came up. I didn't ask questions. One night, I got a call from Natalie Holloway. We talked for over an hour. She had suspected Marcus was cheating for years. Now, she had proof. And, as it turned out, Marcus had never owned his wealth. Their home, cars, lifestyle, all paid for by Natalie's family trust. Marcus wasn't on the trust. By the last update I got, he was living in a cheap motel, drowning in debt, and completely alone. I hoped it stayed that way. Meanwhile, Olivia was getting stronger. A month after the accident, she left the hospital for a few hours. It was time to say goodbye to Samuel. The funeral felt unreal. We were all grieving. But Olivia? She was the calmest of us all. She smiled at old memories, laughed at the good times. And when she cried, she comforted everyone else. She was still in a wheelchair, her body wrapped in bandages. A deep scar ran from her forehead down to her cheek. The doctors said it might fade over time, or she could opt for surgery. Either way, it was a permanent reminder of what she'd been through. I stayed by her side, pushing her wheelchair through the halls. Her nurse lingered nearby, but she gave me space to care for Olivia. It felt like the least I could do. A month later, I was in Olivia's hospital room, sorting through bills and paperwork when I felt her eyes on me. I set down my pen and looked up. "What's wrong, Petal? Need something?" She didn't answer. Tears streamed silently down her face. I was at her side in an instant. She clung to me, her body trembling as she sobbed into my chest. I checked the monitors, but her vitals were fine. This was emotional, not physical. The hospital psychiatrist had warned this might happen. From the moment Olivia woke up, she had focused on everyone else, never herself. "Shoo, Olivia," I whispered, my hand rubbing slow circles on her back. "It's okay. I'm here. You're not alone." She sobbed harder, but she nodded against me. I miss him, you know." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I know. I miss him too." She clung tighter. "Will it ever stop hurting?" I sighed. "I don't know. But Samuel's gone, and you're still here. We have the girls. That has to mean something." She didn't say anything for a long time, just leaned against me, drawing comfort from my presence. Eventually, her breathing slowed. "Thank you, Alex," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know if I could have made it through this without you." Then, before I could react, she tilted her head up and kissed me. For a moment, I kissed her back. Warmth spread through me, something deeper than comfort, something I hadn't felt in years. Then reality hit me, and I pulled away, my heart pounding. "Olivia, I'm sorry," I whispered. She sighed, but didn't let go. "I know, Alex," she said softly, "but I feel something. It never really left, not since high school." That night, sleep was elusive. Somewhere between waking and dreaming, I found myself in a dimly lit bar. The crowd was blurred, voices murmuring, glasses clinking. Everything was hazy, except for one figure. Samuel. I froze. He turned, smiling. "Come on, Alex. You can hug me." I did. He felt real. Warm. Alive. We sat, drinks waiting for us, Kraken and Coke for me, Guinness for him. Samuel studied me, his expression familiar yet distant. "So," he said, watching me. "How are you, Alex?" I let out a long breath. "Not great. The divorce is a mess. The girls are angry. I'm trying to help Olivia, but I feel like I'm drowning." Samuel nodded as if he already knew. "And what about you and Olivia?" I frowned. "What about us?" He raised an eyebrow. "Come on, we've known each other too long for this." "You love her." I scoffed. "She was your wife." "And I'm dead," he said simply. "You can't cheat on me, Alex. She still has a life to live. And you," he pointed at me. "You've loved her all along." I had no words. He grinned. "I give you my blessing, you idiot." Then he lifted his glass. "Now, let's drink before you wake up." For what felt like an hour, we played darts, drank, and sang along with the blurred figures in the background. There was one man watching us, overseeing everything, but his face never quite stayed in focus. Then the bar started to fade. Samuel hugged me. "Thanks for being my friend, Alex." I wanted to hold on, to stay in that moment forever. But everything went black. When I woke, tears streaked my face. By the time I showered and dressed, the dream had started to fade into the background. Just another piece of my subconscious trying to sort itself out. At the office, I caught up on reports, checked in with my managers, and went through the usual motions. By lunchtime, I was walking into the hospital. Olivia lit up when she saw me. Doctors had finally set a discharge date. She was getting restless, eager to be anywhere but here. We were talking about her return home when Samuel's mother, Eleanor, walked in. I had always liked Eleanor. I didn't know her as well as Teresa, but she was warm, kind. She greeted us with a smile. "Olivia, you look so much better today." Then she turned to me, giving a playful wink. "And Alexander, look at you, all dressed up. Samuel would be proud of you." Then I saw them. The yellow sandals. I froze. Olivia caught the shift in my expression instantly. Alex, what's wrong? Eleanor followed my gaze. Oh, are my shoes weird? I just bought them yesterday, special order. I swallowed hard. My heart pounded in my chest. The dream. I could hear Samuel's voice echoing in my head. I looked at Eleanor, then at Olivia, then back at those damn yellow sandals. It's nothing, I muttered. Just a weird dream. Olivia's sharp gaze told me she wasn't going to let it go. But Eleanor was already setting a bag on the table. I brought lunch. Picked up chicken sandwiches from that little Asian shop in North Harbor. She smiled. They're the best in the city. I stiffened. Chicken sandwiches. I could barely hear Olivia's voice. Alex, are you okay? I looked at her, then at Eleanor, then at the bag, then back at the yellow sandals. It was just a dream. A coincidence. I forced myself to eat, even as my hands trembled. And then, just as Samuel had predicted, Rebecca walked in. She looked composed, thinner, but otherwise the same. She carried flowers and a wrapped gift, stepping inside as if the past few months had never happened. Olivia, it's so good to see you, she said, her voice overly bright. You look wonderful. Then she saw me. Her expression darkened instantly. Alexander, she snapped. What are you doing here? I didn't answer. She glared. This is your fault. Olivia is in this hospital. Samuel is dead. You have no right to be near her. Her voice turned venomous. Once I divorce you, I'll make sure Olivia never has to see you again. I stood up. The air thickened with tension. Then a thin, tired voice cut through it. Get out. Everyone turned. Olivia was staring out the window, silent tears slipping down her face. Rebecca faltered. Olivia, no. Olivia's voice hardened. He stays. You leave. Rebecca's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I stepped forward, my voice calm, steady, but unwavering. Rebecca, you heard her. Get out. Rebecca, for once in your life, listen. Go. She jumped up, knocking the gift onto the floor. The bouquet followed, smashing against the wall in a spray of crushed petals. I stepped between her and Olivia, blocking her from the hospital bed. Behind me, Eleanor remained frozen, her face tight with quiet shock. Rebecca's voice rose, sharp and shrill. What the hell, Alexander? What did you tell her? Her gaze darted between me and Olivia, wild with paranoia. She knows this is your fault, doesn't she? She knows you're the reason Samuel is dead. I clenched my jaw. Why would she think I had anything to do with it? Then, her tone shifted, condescending, manipulative. You're the one who needs to leave, Alexander. Olivia needs someone who actually cares about her. She took a step forward as if to reach for Olivia. I'll take care of her, she said smoothly. She lost her husband. She needs real support. Her gaze drifted downward, finally landing on Olivia's bandaged stump. For a brief moment, something flickered across her face. Pity, disgust, maybe even guilt. Then, with a cruel smirk, she sneered. And if she loses her arm, I'll be happy to take care of her too. My patience snapped. What the hell do you think you're doing here? My voice was low, cold, controlled, the kind of quiet fury more dangerous than shouting. You disappeared for months. No visits. No calls. And now you think you can just waltz in here like you belong? I gestured toward Olivia. She lost her husband. I lost my best friend. The girls and I have been here every damn day. Where the hell have you been? Alexander, Olivia murmured, her voice quiet but firm. I ignored her. I know exactly why you're here, I said, my glare locked on Rebecca. You lost your job. Your parents finally got tired of you freeloading in their spare room. And now you think you can weasel your way into Olivia's life? Manipulate her into taking you in. I took a step forward. That's what you do, isn't it? You use people. You drain them dry. Then you move on. Alexander, Olivia's voice came again, a little stronger this time. I was too furious to stop. You burned every bridge you had, and now you. I turned, ready to keep going, but one look at Olivia's face made my anger evaporate. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even surprised. She just looked tired. I exhaled sharply, my chest tight. I'm sorry, I muttered. She shook her head. It's okay. Then she turned to Rebecca, her voice steady, unwavering. You need to leave. Rebecca scoffed. Olivia, I'm here for you, not him. Olivia didn't blink. With the way you treated Alexander, with the tantrum you just threw, you made something very clear. Her voice trembled slightly, but her determination never wavered. You are not my friend anymore. Rebecca's face twisted in disbelief. You can't be serious. Olivia's lips pressed into a thin line. And don't you dare blame Alexander for Samuel's death. That's on you. Rebecca stiffened. You cheated. You became someone vile. Someone unrecognizable. I trusted you for years, and now? I'm ashamed I ever called you a friend. Rebecca opened her mouth to argue, but Olivia lifted her stump and cut her off. Leave, Rebecca. Her voice was cold. Absolute. You are not welcome here. And if you don't go now, I'll call security. Rebecca's expression curdled into something ugly. Her eyes burned with resentment. Her lips curled into a sneer. Well, screw you, Olivia. I see how it is. You hypocritical. Eleanor gasped. Olivia inhaled sharply, but she didn't waver. You can shove whatever help you are offering up your ass, Rebecca spat. Before she could spew another word, I grabbed her arm and dragged her into the hallway. She shrieked, thrashing as I pulled her toward the exit. Hospital staff turned their heads, eyes wide, but I didn't stop. I shoved open the fire doors and threw her outside. The doors slammed shut behind us. Rebecca stumbled but quickly regained her footing. What the hell, Alexander? I stepped closer, my voice dangerously quiet. I don't know what happened to you, I said, my restraint hanging by a thread. I don't know how you became this person. But whatever game you're playing, it ends here. Rebecca blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Alexander. No. Rebecca, shut up. Her mouth snapped shut. I didn't stop. My voice was cold. Unshaking. You destroyed everything. Your daughters want nothing to do with you. Your friends are gone. No one wants you around. I leaned in slightly. You have nothing left. The fire doors burst open. 2 burly security guards stepped outside. One of them, Ben, a guy who had seen me visit Olivia every day, gave me a knowing look. Everything all right, Mr. Vaughn? I nodded. I'm fine, Ben. She was just leaving. Ben turned to Rebecca, completely unimpressed. You were just leaving, weren't you, ma'am? Rebecca's eyes darted between us. Then she forced a smirk. Sure. I'll see you later, Alexander. I shook my head. I hope not. We watched as she stalked away. Once she was gone, the guards escorted me back to Olivia's room. Eleanor was still there, whispering to Olivia. But when I walked in, she stood up and hugged me tightly. Thank you, Alexander, she murmured. Now take care of her. She needs you. Then she left, catching the elevator home. I turned to Olivia and sat on the edge of her bed. Are you okay? She snorted. Shouldn't I be asking you that? I shrugged. It's been a weird day. I hesitated. But now that Rebecca is gone, I feel calmer. I ran a hand through my hair. But honestly, I think it started with that dream last night. Olivia tilted her head. Dream? I nodded, suddenly exhausted. Yeah. Couldn't sleep, tossed and turned, and then I dreamed about Samuel. In a pub. Olivia's breath hitched. I frowned. It was strange, I said. I knew it wasn't real. The place was enormous. There were people, but... She swallowed hard. Then, barely above a whisper, she finished my thought. They were blurry. My entire body went still. She met my gaze, and I saw it, the same realization sinking in for both of us. Yeah, I said slowly. Everyone but Samuel. And some other guy. I can't place him, but Samuel was clear. We talked. He told me what would happen today. Eleanor's sandals. The sandwiches. Rebecca showing up. He knew everything before it happened. Her fingers tightened around mine. There was more, she whispered. Wasn't there? I nodded. My throat felt tight. A single tear slid down her cheek. Love, Alexander. All your days. I sucked in a sharp breath. Crows, I rasped. Her chin trembled as she nodded, another tear falling. That was the last thing Samuel said before we blacked out, she whispered. Before he died. I felt my chest clench. He told me I had to tell you, she murmured. That you wouldn't be able to ask, but I had to say it out loud. And just like that, we broke. She fell into my arms, and I held her tight, our sobs mingling as we mourned the man we had both loved. A best friend. A husband. A father. The loss was still raw, still heavy. But for the first time in months, we weren't grieving alone. As the night deepened, Olivia shifted in her hospital bed, making room for me. Without hesitation, I climbed in beside her. She nestled against me, her body warm and fragile. Exhausted, drained, but for the first time in a long time, at peace. I pressed a soft kiss to her temple. I love you, Petal. She snorted softly. I love you too, Alex. The next morning, clapping woke us up. Lily, standing in the doorway with Sophie and Jacob, arms crossed, grinning. Well, isn't this adorable? Sophie teased. Lily smirked. Took you too long enough. I sighed. Good morning, nosy children. Sophie turned to Jacob and kissed him. Morning, babe. Olivia smiled, then turned to me, her expression thoughtful. Alex, we have a lot to talk about. And we did. Later that week, we made a decision. Olivia wasn't going back to her old apartment. Instead, she moved in with Lily and me in the new house, closer to the hospital and the support she needed. Sophie and Jacob took over her old place, planning to rent out the spare rooms to university students. By the time Olivia was officially discharged, her stiff casts were replaced with removable braces. And for the first time, we saw the full extent of her missing forearm. The scars were healing, but the reality of it still hit hard. Most of the time, she accepted it. But there were moments when it crushed her. Coming home was bittersweet. Her doctors assured her she could live a full life, including relationships, whenever she was ready. Of course, the kids had already made that decision for us. Instead of setting up the guest room, they put her things in the master bedroom. Presumptuous brats. I didn't mind. That night, after dinner, Sophie and Jacob left, and Lily went to a friend's place. For the first time since the accident, Olivia and I were truly alone. We both knew what that meant. A few weeks later, my divorce from Rebecca was finalized. The prenup held. She got nothing. No stake in my business. No claim on my house. Still, I wrote her a check for $40,000. More than she deserved. Why? 2 reasons. 1. I wanted her gone. She had burned every bridge, and I wanted her to have just enough money to disappear forever. Last I heard, she had moved to Wollongong, working a mediocre job and struggling to rebuild her life. Far enough to ensure she'd never come back. 2. Money never mattered to me. It was never about that. As for Marcus, he hit rock bottom. After failing to find work, he started dealing pills. In true Marcus fashion, he got caught selling to an undercover cop. 2-year sentence. Couldn't have happened to a better guy. 6 months later, Olivia and I got married. She was stunning in her wedding dress. But I knew how much she had struggled. Losing her arm had left wounds deeper than skin. She battled with insecurities and depression, but with me and the girls by her side, she never stayed down for long. She found purpose. After completing her psychology degree, she became a counselor, specializing in helping amputees adjust to their new reality. 2 years later, on Australia Day, she was honored for her contributions. During her speech, she called me on stage, catching me completely off guard. I wouldn't be here without Alexander, she said, her voice filled with love. He held me up when I couldn't stand, lifted me when I fell, and never let me believe I was less. He loved me through it all. I'll never forget that moment. From then on, we spoke at conferences, gave interviews, and helped others who had faced the same struggles. But I was the only one who saw her on the hardest days. The quiet nights when grief crept in. The frustration when she struggled to do things one-handed. The mornings when she woke up and reached for something, only to remember it was gone. No matter what life threw at us, I was always there to catch her. Disagreements came and went, but we never let them fester. We had learned the hard way that time was too precious to waste. 3 years passed. And then, Rebecca reappeared. It was Sophie and Jacob's wedding. They had built their careers, their future, and now it was time to take the next step. Sophie didn't want her mother there. They had barely spoken in 3 years, and the few times they had, it had ended in disaster. I convinced her otherwise. Not for Rebecca's sake. For Sophie's. I didn't want my daughter to carry regrets. Sophie agreed on her terms. Rebecca would sit with the other guests, far from the family table. I shrugged. As long as she wasn't near me or Olivia, I didn't care. So, a compromise was made. Rebecca sat with her elderly parents, who seemed just as eager to keep their distance. Like any man dealing with an ex at his daughter's wedding, I ended up at the bar, ordering a Kraken and Coke. It wasn't on the menu, but I was paying for the damn wedding, so I drank what I wanted. That's when Rebecca appeared. She leaned against the counter, ordered a glass of white wine, and spoke without turning toward me. I never asked for forgiveness, did I? It wasn't a question. No, I said, not bothering to look at her. Instead, I watched Olivia and our daughters at the far end of the room. They were laughing carefree. A warmth spread through my chest. Then, I turned slightly. But I never expected you to. Rebecca sighed. You're right. She swirled her wine, voice soft, almost regretful. I wasn't myself back then. I was lost. I took a slow sip. Across the room, Olivia caught my eye. She smiled, then frowned when she saw who was next to me. I shook my head, letting her know it wasn't worth worrying about. Rebecca noticed. I saw you both at the Australia Day ceremony, she admitted. I've followed what you've done since then. Her gaze lingered on Olivia and the girls, a world she was no longer a part of. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They hate me, don't they? I exhaled. Hate is a strong word. Then I smirked. Actually, no. It's the right word. She flinched. But time dulls things, I added. Maybe in 10, 15 years, they'll call you. She let out a small breath. Then she turned to me. And you? Her voice was quieter now. Do you hate me? I shrugged. Hate? Despise? Resent? I took another long sip. Pick one. The band began tuning up. Soon, I danced with my daughter. Rebecca studied me for a long moment. But you convinced Sophie to invite me, she said. Why, if you hate me so much? For the first time that night, I really looked at her. She was a shell. The years had not been kind. Her hair overdyed and brittle, her skin sallow, her posture hunched, as though regret had physically weighed her down. This wasn't the woman I had once loved. This was someone who had destroyed everything and now had nothing left. I took a slow breath and spoke. No mother should miss her daughter's wedding. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't argue. But I didn't invite you for you, I added. I did it so our daughter wouldn't wonder one day if she should have given you another chance. I turned back to my drink. That's all. I met her gaze one last time. And if I never see you again, I'll consider myself lucky. With that, I walked away. As I reached my family, I heard her whisper, I'm sorry, but it didn't matter anymore. We danced. We laughed. We celebrated Sophie and Jacob's love. And I never saw Rebecca again. Years later, she was gone. We found out through her parents just before Lily's engagement. A sudden medical complication from an ovarian cyst. She passed in a hospital bed, alone, only her parents there. She never reached out, never tried. She simply faded away. But our story continued. Olivia and I built a life together. We traveled. We spoiled our grandchildren and later, our great-grandchildren. Our days were filled with laughter, stories, and the love we had built over decades. Through it all, Olivia and I never wavered. When I looked at her, I didn't see the years that had passed. I didn't see the wrinkles, the silver hair. I saw the girl I had loved at 18. The woman I had married at 40. The mischievous grandmother who, even at 82, could still make my heart race with just a smile. And I knew. I was lucky. I was loved. And I would be. Until the very end.